That night, the house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the living room wall, each second dragging heavier than the last. I sat on the couch in the dim glow of the lamp, pretending to watch the muted TV, but really listening for the sound of her key in the door. My nurse wife had texted me hours earlier saying her shift was running late because of an emergency in the ER, and I believed her, because that's what I'd always done. Believe her, trust her. But when the clock passed midnight, something inside me started to twist. Then at 12:43, the front door clicked open. She stepped inside. Her shoulders slumped like she was carrying the weight of 100 patients on her back. But her eyes didn't search for mine like they usually did, and her smile, the one she always wore when she saw me waiting, was nowhere to be found. She walked past me without so much as a kiss, muttering something about being exhausted, and I caught it. That smell. It wasn't the sharp sting of antiseptic, the sterile scent of latex gloves, or the faint trail of hospital-grade soap I'd grown used to over the years. No, this was warm, musky, unfamiliar. It clung to her scrubs in a way that made my chest tighten. It was the kind of scent you didn't pick up from saving lives. It was the kind you picked up from being too close to someone in a way you shouldn't. My pulse quickened, and every instinct screamed at me to say something, to ask, to demand an explanation. But my throat locked. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, watching her drop her bag in the hallway and disappear into the shower. The sound of running water filled the house, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I replayed the way she'd walked in, the way she avoided my eyes, the heaviness in her voice. My mind was already searching for logical answers. Maybe a patient had hugged her. Maybe she brushed past someone in the elevator. But deep down, I knew it wasn't random. It wasn't innocent. And yet, part of me wanted desperately to be wrong. I stayed there, staring at the closed bathroom door, thinking about every night she'd been late in the past few months. Every time she claimed she was covering for someone, every excuse I never questioned. The smell felt like proof, but proof of what I wasn't ready to face. Not yet. And that's when the first crack in the trust one thought was unshakable began to spread. If you ever loved someone so much that the thought of losing them feels like losing a part of yourself, then you know the pain of that first doubt. It's the seed that, once planted, grows into something you can't control. And before I even realized it, I had already decided tomorrow I was going to find out where that smell really came from, no matter what it cost me. Because sometimes the truth is the only thing more dangerous than a lie. If you've ever laid next to someone who made you feel completely alone, then maybe this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And if that's true, subscribe. Because stories like this deserve to be heard by those who understand. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not because I wanted to, but because my mind wouldn't let me sleep. That scent from her scrubs still haunted me, clinging to my memory like smoke in a room with no windows. She was still asleep beside me, her hair spread across the pillow, her breathing slow and steady, almost too peaceful for someone who just pulled a so-called night shift. I stared at her, searching for something, any sign that could tell me I was wrong, that my gut had betrayed me. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that your gut doesn't whisper without reason. I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went straight to the laundry basket where she had tossed her scrubs the night before. I lifted them slowly, almost afraid to confirm what I already knew. The smell was still there, stronger now, embedded deep in the fabric. It wasn't a scent you could mistake. It was intimate, human, primal, and it didn't belong to me. My stomach tightened as I remembered the way she had rushed to the shower, almost as if she needed to wash something away before I noticed. For a moment, I just stood there, holding those scrubs like they were evidence in a trial I hadn't agreed to be part of. My hands shook as a part of me wanted to throw them away, pretend I never noticed, and go back to believing in the woman I married. But the other part of me, the part that had been quietly collecting doubts over the past few months, was wide awake now. That part wasn't going back to sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone on the nightstand. It was right there. One swipe, and I could know everything. But instead, I put it back down. Because once you look, there's no going back. Once you see the truth, it owns you. And I wasn't sure I was ready to be owned by it just yet. Instead, I decided to follow a different path, one that wouldn't just tell me what happened last night, but would show me. I was going to find out where she really went after her shift and who she was with. The idea terrified me, but it also lit a fire inside me I hadn't felt in years. A fire that whispered, "You deserve to know." So I made a plan, a quiet, calculated plan. That night, when she left for another shift, I wouldn't just be waiting on the couch. I'd be somewhere else. Somewhere close enough to smell the truth before it walked through my door again. I don't care about algorithms. I care about the people listening to this who are bleeding silently like I did. If you've ever held back tears just to protect someone who didn't protect you, subscribe. You don't have to do this alone anymore. That night, when she tied her hair back, put on her fresh set of scrubs, and kissed me goodbye with that same soft, mechanical kiss she'd been giving me for weeks, I felt my heart thud in my chest like it was trying to warn me not to let her go. But I smiled anyway, playing my role, pretending I believed every word she said about the double shift and how exhausted she would be by morning. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway, the sound fading into the quiet street, and then I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and the small camera I had borrowed from a friend without explaining why. My hands were clammy, my pulse sharp. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't a jealous husband digging through shadows for sport. I was a man about to walk straight into a truth that could end the life he thought he had. I followed at a distance, careful not to get too close. Every time her brake lights flared red ahead of me, I held my breath. She didn't head toward the hospital. She didn't even take the route that would get her there. Instead, she drove toward the edge of town, the streets getting darker, quieter, the kind of places you only go when you don't want to be found. At one point, she slowed down and turned into a narrow side street, lined with old brick buildings that had long stopped pretending to be anything respectable. I parked a block away, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel, my mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Through the shadow of my windshield, I saw her step out of the car. She didn't look nervous. She didn't even look around to check if anyone was watching. She just walked, confident, purposeful, toward a door that opened before she even knocked. And there he was. I couldn't see his face at first, just the way his shoulders filled the doorway, the way he leaned down toward her with a familiarity that made my throat tighten. Then the light caught him just enough, and I recognized him. Not from the hospital, not from any place she told me about, but from a single photograph I'd seen months ago. A man whose name she once brushed off when I asked. A man I now saw stepping closer to her, in a way no colleague would. My heart pounded in my ears as I lifted the camera, zooming in, my hands trembling not from the cold, but from the certainty that whatever happened next would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my marriage. They disappeared inside, and I sat there in the dark, the weight of the camera in my lap, wondering how long I could sit in that car before the truth demanded I follow them in. I waited in that car longer than I thought a human heart could withstand the pounding that echoed inside my chest, each second stretching into an eternity, where every possible version of the truth played out in my mind like cruel little films. The cold from the night air crept into the crack in the window, mixing with the heat of my own breath as I sat there gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind screamed at me to move, to storm inside, to demand an explanation right there in front of him, but my body wouldn't move because deep down I knew that once I stepped through that door, there would be no turning back. That was the line, the invisible border between suspicion and proof, between ignorance and the kind of knowledge that stains you forever. After what felt like an hour, though I couldn't be sure because time had stopped making sense, the door opened again. The light from inside spilled out into the alley, catching dust in the air like tiny fragments of the truth. She stepped out first, her hair a little messier than when she went in, her scrubs slightly wrinkled in a way that had nothing to do with hospital work. And then he followed, no coat, just a t-shirt despite the chill, his posture casual, his expression carrying that smug familiarity that told me I wasn't just imagining it. They didn't touch, but they didn't need to. Their body language was a language of its own, one I suddenly understood, without translation. I shrank lower in my seat as she walked her car, unlocking it with a calmness that made me question how many times this had happened before. She sat for a moment, scrolling through her phone, and I caught myself wondering, Was she texting me to say she loved me? Was she rehearsing the lies she'd tell when she got home? Or was she writing something to him that I would never read? Words meant only for the man who just shared the same air, the same space, maybe the same touch I once believed belonged only to me? My throat burned as I watched her start the engine, the glow from her dashboard lighting her face in a way that should have looked angelic, but now only felt like the cruelest mask. She drove off in the direction of the hospital, as if she could slip back into her role, without anyone knowing the scene that had just played out in that hidden doorway. I waited until she was out of sight before I started my own engine, following from far enough behind that she'd never suspect. And as the miles rolled under my tires, I realized I wasn't following her to see where she went next. I was following her because I needed to see how far she could go before the truth finally caught up with both of us. The confrontation didn't happen in some explosive, movie-worthy scene where plates shatter against walls and neighbors hear the screaming through thin apartment doors. No, it unfolded in the kind of quiet that is far more dangerous than any yell could ever be. The kind of silence that forces every word to hit harder, cut deeper, and leave marks you can't see but will carry for the rest of your life. She had just stepped to the front door, the faint scent of antiseptic still lingering on her scrubs, but beneath it, unmistakable to me now, was that other scent, not from any hospital. My heart raced, but my voice was steady as I asked her to sit down. She hesitated for just a moment, and in that pause, I could almost hear the battle in her head. Lie as she always did, or finally let the truth crawl out into the open. She sat, crossing her arms like she was shielding herself from a storm she already felt coming. I didn't waste time with small talk. I told her where I'd been, what I'd seen, and described every detail down the way he had stood behind her in that doorway. Her eyes didn't widen in shock like an innocent person's might. Instead, they narrowed ever so slightly, and that was my answer before she even opened her mouth. She tried to laugh it off at first, to call me paranoid, to paint the picture of me as some jealous, over-imaginative husband inventing drama, where there was none. But when I pulled out my phone and showed her the time-stamped photos I had taken, her walking out of that building, him following seconds later, her face drained of color, and the smile that had been hanging on by threads finally collapsed. What hurt the most wasn't just a betrayal. It was how quickly she realized she didn't need to pretend anymore. She exhaled like someone who'd been holding their breath for weeks, maybe months, and in that moment, I understood the sickest part of all. Part of her was relieved to be caught. I asked her one question, the only one that mattered. Why? And she didn't say she didn't love me. She didn't say she had fallen for him. No, what she said was worse. She said she didn't know if she ever truly loved anyone, not in the way I thought love was supposed to mean. It was like she reached inside my chest and ripped out the very foundation of our marriage, not just the present, but the entire history, every I love you we'd ever shared. And as I sat there staring at her, my hands trembling not with rage but with a cold numbness of finality, I realized that this wasn't the kind of wound you stitch back together. This was a kind that left you with a scar that would never stop aching in bad weather, a reminder that sometimes the person who swore to heal you is the very one who leaves you bleeding. If this sounds like your life, stop pretending you're fine. Stop hiding it like I did. Subscribe, not for me, but for every person who thought they were crazy, until the truth finally shattered them. You're safe here. We see you. The night I packed my things wasn't loud or messy. It wasn't the kind of scene where clothes fly across the room and suitcases are slammed shut in rage. It was deliberate, slow, and almost ceremonial, like I was bearing a part of my life instead of just leaving a home. The clock on the wall ticked in that suffocating way it does, when the only thing you can hear is your own breathing. She stayed in the kitchen the whole time, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching me without a word. There was no begging, no apology, no last-minute fight to stop me. Just a hollow silence that told me everything I needed to know. I started with the smallest things. My toothbrush, my watch, the photo of us at the lake from the summer before everything fell apart. I held it for a moment, my thumb brushing over her smile frozen in a moment that no longer existed, before placing it face down in the bottom of my bag. Each item I packed felt like removing a piece of myself from this place, a slow undoing of the life we'd built. I kept expecting some wave of regret to hit me, to make me turn around and try one last time, but it never came. Instead, the further I got, the lighter I felt, even though my chest was heavy with the weight of finality. When I zipped the last bag, I looked at her one more time. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. If anything, she looked relieved. That was when I knew I'd been right all along. She'd stopped caring for me long before I stopped loving her. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob, and for a second I thought about saying something. Anything to mark this ending. But I realized there was no sentence powerful enough to summarize the death of everything we were. So I opened the door and stepped out into the night, letting the cold air hit me like the first breath after being underwater too long. I didn't look back, because looking back meant holding on, and I was finally ready to let go. The car door closed with a weighty thud that seemed louder than it should have been, like it was sealing me inside a different life. I sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, staring at the faint reflection of my own face in the windshield. The street outside was quiet, almost eerily so, as if the world was holding its breath to watch what I would do next. My bags were in the back seat, and the faint scent of her perfume clung to my jacket. An uninvited passenger, I knew I wouldn't shake for a long time. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, but I didn't put the car in gear right away. My eyes drifted to the front window of the house, where the lights were still on. She was probably still leaning against that kitchen counter, maybe scrolling through her phone, maybe already messaging someone else. I thought about all the nights I'd driven down this street, tired from work, knowing she'd be waiting for me. Now I was leaving her behind, and the thought should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was ground below. When I finally shifted into drive, the tires crunch against the gravel, a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness of the night. Each turn I took pulled me further from the life I'd known, and the familiar landmarks blurred past in the corner of my eye. The coffee shop where she used to meet me on my lunch breaks. The little park where we'd once spent hours lying in the grass, making plans for a future that now felt like a cruel joke. With every mile, my chest grew heavier, as if the car itself was dragging the weight of unspoken words and unanswered questions. I thought about texting her, one final message. Something sharp, something that would cut the way her indifference had cut me. But then I realized that would only tether me back to her, and I needed to be untethered. I kept driving, the city lights fading in my rear-view mirror until there was nothing but darkness ahead and behind. Somewhere in that emptiness, I felt the first hint of something I hadn't felt in months: control. My life was mine again, even if I didn't know what to do with it yet. And as the road stretched endlessly before me, I pressed harder on the gas, as if speed itself could erase her from my memory. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, as if the silence itself was alive and pressing against me from all sides. I dropped my keys onto the kitchen counter, and the metallic clink echoed through the empty space like a reminder that there was no one here to answer back. For years, walking through that door meant hearing her voice from another room, the faint hum of her laughter, the sound of her moving around, proof that I wasn't alone in the world. Now, all I could hear was the dull hum of the refrigerator and my own uneven breathing. I wandered from room to room without really knowing why, as if I might find some trace of her that I'd overlooked. Her favorite mug was still in the cupboard, the one with the small crack on the handle she refused to throw away. A single strand of her hair clung to the pillow on the bed. These little ghosts of her were everywhere, haunting me more than her actual presence ever could. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands gripping the sheets, and felt the weight of everything settle on me all at once. The reality was undeniable now. There was no going back to what we were. My chest tightened, not from the loss of her, but from the loss of the man I had been when I believed in us. I thought about calling someone, anyone, just to hear another human voice, but the idea of explaining everything felt exhausting. So instead, I poured myself a glass of water, stood by the window, and looked out at the city lights blinking in the distance. Somewhere out there, she was probably laughing, maybe leaning into someone else the way she used to lean into me. The thought should have broken me. But instead, it settled into something colder, a quiet acceptance. This was my life now, this empty apartment, this silence, this freedom that felt both like a gift and a punishment. As the clock ticked past midnight, I realized I wasn't waiting for her to come home anymore. I was waiting for myself to show up, the version of me that could live without her, the version that could breathe again without the weight of her absence crushing my chest. And for the first time that night, I let the silence stay. I let it fill the room, fill me, until it didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It just felt like the truth that you've come this far. That means something. You felt this. You lived it. Maybe not this exact story, but your own version of it. So if you're still here, still breathing under the weight of something they'll never apologize for, hit subscribe. Because no one should walk through this kind of betrayal alone. And if no one else says it, I will. I'm glad you're still here.